Welcome to Sustainability Matters. I'm your host, Tria Case. Today's topic is single-use plastics, which are frankly everywhere and all too convenient and have a long shelf life. Not only have they seeped into almost every part of society, they've seeped into our bodies. It will take a long, multi-pronged approach to ease them out of our lives through a focused effort on creating environmentally friendly alternatives, enacting restrictions, and changing our behaviors. On today's show, we'll highlight the prevalence of single-use plastic in our city and what you can do to make the change. First, here is Andrew Falzone with an overview.
When plastics were first invented way back in 1907, they were revolutionary and in many ways changed our lives and advanced other technologies in ways unimaginable. Modern plastics are used to save lives in artificial heart valves and help people stay independent with artificial joints. They make vehicles lighter and, as a result, more fuel efficient. But what happens when you have too much of a good thing? What happens when you use something only once, but that something lasts a lot longer? This is the answer. And if it looks like a problem, you're right. And the name of that problem? Single-use plastics. But what are they? Single-use plastics are those disposable items we use for a few minutes and then discard, and they've permeated our daily lives. Their convenience comes at a significant environmental cost. In New York State alone, we consume over 23 billion single-use plastic bags in a year, and these bags don't break down quickly. Depending on the type of plastic used, estimates say it can take anywhere from decades or even centuries for these plastic bags to degrade naturally. Following California and Hawaii, New York State implemented its own Plastic Bag Waste Reduction Act in 2020. This law bans the distribution of most single-use plastic bags by retailers and imposes a 5-cent fee on paper bags, all with the goal of getting New York shoppers to bring their own reusable bags when they go shopping.
Do your part. It's easy. Bring your own bag.
New York City has also taken steps to curb single-use plastics. In 2019, the city banned plastic foam takeout containers and packing peanuts containing polystyrene foam, better known by the brand name Styrofoam, which takes upwards of 500 years to fully decompose. Then, in 2021, the city went a step further in prohibiting plastic straws and coffee stirrers. Then in 2023, New York City passed the Skip the Stuff law, which prohibits restaurants and delivery services from providing single-use plastic utensils, condiment packets, extra containers, or napkins unless specifically requested by the customer. When it comes to single-use alternatives, remember the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And if you can't use your own reusable utensils, compostable cutlery made out of bamboo or cornstarch works well. But when it comes to plastic recycling, sometimes the numbers just don't add up. Greenpeace produced this video emphasizing the relationship between big brands and big oil, and a 2022 Greenpeace report indicated that only about 5% of plastic actually becomes something new. Then a 2020 NPR investigation alleged that the plastic industry misled the public about the recyclability of plastic, even though industry reports indicated they knew back in the 70s and 80s that plastics could not be recycled economically. And according to a 2021 Consumer Reports article, the popular perception that plastic is easily and widely recycled has been shaped by decades of carefully calculated messaging designed and paid for by the petroleum and gas companies that make most of that plastic in the first place. That same report indicates that as of 2016, the U.S. produces 46.3 million tons of plastic waste per year, which means proper disposal and plastic alternatives are key to a sustainable future. I'm Andrew Falzone for Sustainability Matters on CUNY TV.
Thank you, Andrew. Today we welcome Rhonda Kaiser, who is the chair of the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board and the education director for Cafeteria Culture, a nonprofit that teaches environmental education, and Siddhartha Hayes, who is the manager of research and aquaria at the Hudson River Park Trust. Thank you both for joining us here today.
Thank you so much.
Siddhartha, so you took a look at the Hudson River. What did you find?
Yeah, we started back in 2015 with, at the time, cutting-edge methodologies from NOAA's recommendations. It was still an emerging field, but essentially what we did within Hudson River Park, which is from Chambers to 59th Street on the west side of Manhattan, is essentially take a big net with a very, very fine mesh, 0.3 millimeters, 300 microns, trawl it from a boat over transects at various locations to see how much plastic is floating on the surface of the water. And what we found was around 150 to 850,000 pieces per kilometer squared. Again, our threshold cutoff was 0.3 millimeters. And now, in 2023 and in recent years, we know that a lot of plastics, they don't stop breaking down when they're microplastics. They get even smaller. They become nanoplastics. And there's a lot of things we weren't able to look for at the time using those given protocols. Nowadays, the gold standard is spectroscopy, where you can basically shine light at plastic. It gives off an emission spectrum, and then you can tell not only that it is plastic, but what type of plastic is.
We recently heard from some students who had concerns. Let's take a student question.
Hi, my name is Abigail Mandelis, and I am from Borough of Manhattan Community College. And my question today is, what are the major environmental impacts of single-use plastics in New York?
That is a good one. That's a huge question, right? There are a lot of very well-known, I think, impacts. Animals of all size grades potentially are at risk for attempting to ingest plastic, which can cause just physical harm, mechanical harm. You can get wrapped up in it. But then what's less well understood, rather, is additional effects of compounds that have adhered to the plastic through adsorption. So whether those were materials or chemicals or things that were added in production or in pre-production to help the plastic be malleable or persist in some way, or if it's something that's floating around in the water because of street runoff, that then when the plastics are floating in the water, they'll collect them. They can act as sort of vectors for both compounds and actually pathogens as well, potentially. So then you have the added effect of, if an animal ingests this and it's okay, it still might have effects down the road. In the food chain is bioaccumulation, right? We know about this with heavy metals. The same thing is true for plastics. You have tiny organisms, planktonic organisms eating plastic, and then you have a fish that eats hundreds of those per day, and then you have a larger fish that eats hundreds of those fish, and you get this exponential effect. And the fact of the matter is, we don't know the full effects of these materials being ingested over a long period of time because they take a lifetime to study. So this is something that's really on the cutting edge of plastic research, is what does it actually do to the organisms once it's in their body?
I would just love to add that, plastic, of course, now you talked about the marine animals, but it gets into us as well. And you may have some neighborhoods that have more street litter than others. They may not get cleaned as often as other neighborhoods, but microplastics are the great equalizer. It is the NIMBY issue, not in my backyard, not in my body. So microplastics are in all of us. It's not discriminating in terms of which neighborhood we live in. So it gets into our tissue, and we don't know, right?
We're just figuring
it
out, absolutely. Right. How do we get the plastics out of our bodies? What are the...
I mean, there are steps you can potentially take to limit or to reduce the amount of plastic you're putting into your body, for sure. One of them is just being mindful about, like you were saying, going to the store and trying to not buy things in plastic. It can be not possible in every scenario, but every little bit helps reducing the amount of, being mindful of the containers you're putting food in. Even something as simple as like a cutting board. Is it plastic, right? Is it wood? Are you reheating food in a plastic container? Right. Often when you have something, a comestible, something that's going to be ingested for long periods of time sitting in a plastic vessel, that ends up being either a major source of plastic pieces or the chemicals on them, right? So plastic water bottles, Fortunately, in New York, we have pretty good tap water. We're fortunate enough to be able to use tap water. That does obviously get into a huge access and equity issue. Any water is better than no water, but reducing plastic bottle, liquid consumption, being mindful about food. I was just reading a study about air and indoor air, right? And inhalation of particles from synthetic textiles. So spending time in the great outdoors is good for you on a myriad of levels, psychologically, physiologically, as well.
We actually spoke with another student who had a question.
Hi, I'm Francesca Lopez from the Graduate Center, and my question is, how do businesses in New York adapt to the transition away from single-use plastics?
So, Rhonda, we need to make these changes. How do businesses begin to do that? How do we even begin to do that?
I think it does start on the large scale, right? Because we can make choices, but sometimes we go into a store and we don't have choices. Right. So we do need to start on the systemic level, because this is a systemic problem. So it needs systemic solutions. You know, we already have two great examples. The plastic bag ban in New York State. People have started to bring their own bags. Stores stop carrying plastic bags. They're charging money for paper bags. And then styrofoam, or expanded polystyrene, is another great example. It started with schools. Cafeteria Culture, led by Debbie Lee Cohen, started a student-led campaign to get rid of styrofoam in schools, and it happened in 2015. And then several short years later, in 2019, it was banned in New York City. And then in 2022, it was banned in New York State. And now companies are changing their inventories. They're changing the way they deliver food and food products. I completely believe in the resilience of human beings and in the business community. They're changing all the time and adapting because of customer demand. And this is, in a way, customer demand that is being helped by legislation. New York State has a law that has a lot of support in the legislature. It's the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. It used to be called EPR, but it is about making producers responsible for the packaging that they're making to be trash, and also reducing those toxins that are put in there to make it, it's very useful, right, those toxins, but we need to legislate them out of our health sphere. And then it also would reduce packaging in general by about 50% in the next 10 to 12 years. So that is one law that's really important and significant, and it would just help all different kinds of plastic packaging across the spectrum. Another law that goes really well with it is the bottle bill, which we currently, for every piece of drink beverage, we pay a deposit now, and you could get that deposit back. It's the highest capture rate. It's the least placed into the wrong bin, the least winding up on the streets or in our waterways, because it has value and because that people have access to that value. We want to expand the deposit to 10 cents per item, and we want to expand the amount of items that are in that. It seems to be a really easy one. It's a very successful law. We're just building on that success. So really, to push those two laws forward would take us leaps and bounds, and New York State would be a leader in this arena.
In some way, those would get at reduce and recycle.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of in that.
Yeah, and both of them also are sort of moving towards refill systems, which requires another systemic change, right? There needs to be systemic infrastructure that goes with that, or thinking about how it's returned and how it gets refilled. And we used to do it, we used to do it with all of our packaging.
Bottom up, top down, regulatory, all together.
Yeah, the whole system has to work together.
Yeah.
Recently, our producer, Mariev Ami, visited Governor's Island and took a look at a new business model for recycling plastics using solar.
Most plastic in the U.S. is sent abroad for processing and then shipped back to the U.S. to be made into products using fossil fuels. It turns out a company called Circular Economy Manufacturing, located on Governor's Island, is proving all of it could be done locally.
We waste a lot of energy and we emit a lot of fossil fuels moving material around. So instead of moving all that material around, we could recycle it in place, and turn it into useful products right then and there using only the power of the sun. My name is Bernd Roth. I'm the co-founder and director of Circular Economy Manufacturing. This microfactory you see here is our first installation, and we hope to have many more. It'll stay right around 350. I cook it for 10 minutes to get this effect. I'm going to turn it off. I'll go ahead and open it up and show you one of the new lights that we're going to be making. Awesome. We're going to take one of these great little cork LED lights that are rechargeable. We'll drill a little hole, put it in the bottom, and when it's dark out, this makes a really cool light. So the circular economy starts with renewable energy and really tries to keep all of our materials in use. If we design everything into one of those two categories so that it can either be recycled at the end of its life or composted at the end of its life, then there is no landfill, there is no waste, and we have what we are striving for, which is a circular economy. High density polyethylene is used to make detergent bottles, milk jugs, comes in these colors. We are now getting a bag like this every 2 weeks from one photo lab in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. The plastic flakes fall to the bottom of the mold. We're heating the mold, and when those plastic flakes fall to the bottom, they start to melt. They go from a solid to a liquid. It's just gravitational force. So we can make some really big things, including, 4 kids' chairs at once, perhaps even 6. We'll be selling products first to individuals or citizens, right? Small things like lights or planters or soap dishes, compost bins. The next one is for cities or municipalities where we believe we can make their plastic urban infrastructure like traffic cones or bike lane bollards or construction barrels or the construction barriers. Cities use so much of these plastic objects, and they have to purchase them, import them into the city, while simultaneously exporting the materials that they could be used to be making them. So we hope to fix that by collecting the material that they are shipping away and instead shred it up and make all that basic plastic urban infrastructure right in place. So the idea is that we could install a microfactory next to every recycling center around every city around the world, frankly.
What's the role that education plays in helping us to change our behaviors?
I really think we need to look towards youth. Youth are really leading a lot of change. Our youth with cafeteria culture are making huge strides in systemic change. Not only did we help get rid of styrofoam in schools, but also our students now are leading plastic-free lunch day in New York City schools. New York City schools are the second largest meal service in the country after the US military. It's about 850,000 trays a day, and if you stack those up, it is 8.5 times higher than the Empire State Building. So that's a significant amount of lunches, and it's a great way to sort of visualize data. So our students are collecting their own data, and they're using their own stories to talk to decision makers, to testify at city council hearings, or hopefully state legislation to try to get some laws passed, because they are in a situation where they're getting school lunch every day, so they're not having those choices. Or maybe they live in a neighborhood where there's a bodega and there's no opportunity to get their food in bulk. And not only does it happen once a month now in New York City schools, it happened in our movie Microplastic Madness. Our students did it for the first time in their one schools. So right now we're doing it in 750 more elementary schools across New York City twice a year. There are school districts across the country who are joining in.
Everybody needs a plastic-free lunch day. We should all be doing that.
Exactly.
Definitely. I mean, educating people that there are alternatives, like you said, getting people interested, invested, and familiar with these concepts, right? Getting it in schools, or again, early science education. The park, like we do a ton of place-based science education, inviting students to come to the park to see wild animals, to get their hands dirty, right, to really make a connection, right, with the natural world. It can seem, especially in New York City, like you were so removed from it when we're not, but it is easy to get wrapped up in this artificial separation that we have created as a species, like what cafeteria culture is doing. On a smaller scale, the park is doing this Park Over Plastic initiative we've had for the past several years now. Any business within Hudson River Park needs to comply with these guidelines to be eco-friendly, to be green, to reduce plastic, to only use cans. We put together essentially a toolkit that can be shared with similar organizations. This is something you can share to help go green. I really like how you focused on that, because that really is, I think, the pre-legislative change that can be done, absolutely.
We have also toolkits we use with cafeteria culture, teaching about the problem, and we do teach the unvarnished truth to students from 3rd grade up to 12th grade. And every time we had a science teacher one time talking about monomers and polymers and the health implications with each one of them, and one student raised his hand and looked at me and said, "What can we do about it?" Because he knew that we were going to give them something that we can do. And that's the thing. Our students don't get climate grief because it's about finding what you can do to answer any of these problems that we're learning about.
CUNY has several environmental science programs that allow students to be hands-on and find career paths. Here's one example. Take a look. Are there other tools or other alternatives that you can think of that would help us reduce our use of plastics?
I mean, the sort of alchemist's stone, right, of this whole thing is finding something that could replace plastics, right? Like a philosopher's stone material that would, doesn't do the same things, but has the same purposes. So far, we haven't found it, but there are a lot of researchers all over the world looking into that. That's also a very emergent field in the past decade or so, looking at growing fungus into a biodegradable packaging, into growing mycelium into bespoke packaging basically for various products, right? That then could be composted very easily because it's a natural material. Looking at bacteria or microbes that could potentially break down plastic, right? That's sort of another Goldilocks thing, which absolutely should still be attempted while very discrete intentional legislative steps like you're talking about are also being made. But there are a lot of options, and I mean, humans are pretty ingenious. We figured out how to make plastic. We should be able to figure out how to unmake it.
The plastic alternative.
Yeah.
Thank you both for coming today and for all that you're doing to help us reduce single-use plastics here in New York City and beyond.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
You can find more about careers in environmental sciences at cuny.edu. Please keep the conversation going and follow us or send us a message on social media. Thank you for watching, and tune in next month when we will discuss extreme weather events.